This card, this piece of plastic or metal or whatever yours is made of, works every single time you use it. At the grocery store, at the gas station, online at 2 in the morning, at a street vendor in Tokyo, at a hospital in an emergency, it just works. You have never once thought about what happens if it does not. And in 2026, that assumption that Visa and Mastercard just work, always, everywhere, forever, is one of the most dangerous financial assumptions you can make. Because the systems behind that card are more vulnerable, more concentrated, and more geopolitically exposed than at any point in their history. And the day those systems stop working for any reason, the consequences for your daily life, your business, and the entire global economy arrive within hours. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how fragile the payment infrastructure you depend on every day actually is, what happens when it fails, what the historical record and 2026 threat landscape tell us about the real risks, and precisely what you need to do right now to protect yourself and your financial life. Let me start by making sure you understand what Visa and Mastercard actually are, because most people have a fundamental misconception about these companies that matters enormously for understanding the risk. Visa and Mastercard are not banks. They do not lend you money. They do not hold your deposits. What they are, at their core, is network infrastructure companies. They are the pipes and the plumbing of the global payment system. When you tap your card at a coffee shop, here is what actually happens in the roughly 2 seconds it takes for that transaction to be approved. Your card terminal sends a request to the acquiring bank, the bank that processes payments for the merchant. The acquiring bank routes that request through Visa or Mastercard's network to your issuing bank, the bank that gave you the card. Your issuing bank checks your account, verifies the transaction, and sends an approval back through Visa or Mastercard's network to the terminal. The coffee shop gets paid, you get your coffee. The whole thing happens in under 2 seconds and involves at least 4 separate institutions communicating through a centralized network infrastructure that Visa and Mastercard own and operate. Now, here is the number that should make you understand why this matters at a civilizational scale. Visa alone processed approximately 212 billion transactions in its fiscal year 2024, representing approximately $15 trillion in payment volume. Mastercard processed a comparable volume. Together, Visa and Mastercard processed the vast majority of global card payment volume, operating in over 200 countries and territories worldwide. In 2026, approximately 85% of non-cash consumer transactions in developed economies flow through one of these two networks. Think about what that concentration means. 2 companies, 2 private American companies, sit at the center of the payment infrastructure for the entire global economy. If a significant portion of the world's transactions flow through 2 networks, and those 2 networks share common vulnerabilities, technology infrastructure, regulatory jurisdiction, geopolitical exposure, the systemic risk of simultaneous disruption is not theoretical, it is architectural. Here is the analogy that I think captures this most clearly. Imagine if 85% of the world's fresh water supply was delivered through 2 pipe systems owned by the same American company, running on the same underlying technology, subject to the same regulatory jurisdiction, and dependent on the same physical infrastructure. Everyone would immediately understand that this was a catastrophically concentrated vulnerability. We would consider it an unacceptable systemic risk. We would demand redundancy and alternatives. That is exactly the situation with global payments in 2026, and yet almost nobody thinks about it this way until the system fails. Now, let me walk you through the specific vulnerability categories that make a simultaneous or near-simultaneous Visa and Mastercard disruption more than a theoretical possibility. The first vulnerability is cyber attack. Both Visa and Mastercard are among the highest value targets in the world for nation-state cyber actors and sophisticated criminal organizations. They know this. They spend enormous amounts of money on cybersecurity. Visa alone spends over $1 billion annually on security infrastructure, but they are not invulnerable. The question is not whether a sophisticated and well-resourced adversary could disrupt their systems. It is whether the adversary's capabilities have grown faster than the defenses. And in 2026, the cybersecurity community's consensus assessment is that nation-state offensive capabilities, particularly from Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, have advanced to levels that make critical financial infrastructure genuinely vulnerable in ways that were not true even 5 years ago. The second vulnerability is geopolitical weaponization. This is the one that has already happened, and it is the most instructive for understanding the real-world consequences. In March 2022, in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Visa and Mastercard Mastercard suspended all operations in Russia. Within days, Russian cardholders could not use their cards internationally, and internationally issued cards did not work at Russian merchants. Approximately 17 million Visa and Mastercards in Russia became useless for international transactions overnight. The economic disruption was immediate and significant. Now here is why that event is so important for everyone watching this video, not just Russians. The Russia suspension demonstrated that Visa and Mastercard are not neutral infrastructure. They are American companies subject to US government pressure, operating under US law, and capable of being used as instruments of geopolitical policy. Every country in the world, every government, every central bank, every financial institution observed what happened to Russia in 2022 and immediately asked the same question: could this happen to us? And the answer for any country that finds itself in serious conflict with US foreign policy is clearly yes. Now, let me make this completely concrete. Let me walk you through what actually happens hour by hour, day by day, if Visa and Mastercard simultaneously stop processing transactions. Not a partial disruption, a full stop. Because I think until you walk through it, it is very easy to underestimate how completely dependent modern economic life is on these two networks. Hour 1. Transactions begin declining globally. At first, it looks like a technical glitch. Individual cardholders see their transactions failing at checkout. Merchants see their terminals returning error codes. Customer service lines at Visa and Mastercard light up with millions of calls simultaneously. Social media begins trending with payment failure reports. But here's the thing: most consumers have almost no cash on hand. According to Federal Reserve data, the average American carries less than $20 in cash as of 2026. The cashless society that seemed so convenient on the way in becomes a crisis on the way out. By hour 3, grocery stores, which have reduced their cash handling infrastructure over years of cashless adoption, begin facing real operational problems. Some smaller merchants who went fully cashless have no mechanism to accept payment at all. Gas stations, where the majority of fuel purchases are card-based, begin shutting pumps as card authorization systems fail. Hospitals, which process billions of dollars in insurance claim payments and patient co-payments through card networks, face administrative paralysis on the payment side. Pharmacies, where millions of Americans collect prescription medications, face disruption in their payment processing. Day 2, the liquidity crisis begins. Here is where the disruption moves beyond inconvenience into genuine economic danger. Small businesses, which typically have less financial buffer than large corporations, begin facing an immediate cash flow crisis. They cannot collect payment from customers, but their own obligations, supplier payments, payroll direct deposits, utility payments, lease payments, many of which also run through card networks or ACH networks that depend on card settlement infrastructure, begin to malfunction. A restaurant that cannot collect payment from diners for 48 hours faces an immediate operating cash crisis. A retail store that cannot process sales cannot fund its payroll run at the end of the week. Day 3. Payroll disruption begins. The vast majority of American workers are paid through direct deposit, which runs through the ACH network, which interfaces with card settlement systems in complex ways that most people are unaware of. While ACH is technically a separate network from Visa and Mastercard's consumer payment networks, the banking system infrastructure that supports both is deeply intertwined. In a major Visa and Mastercard outage, the knock-on effects on interbank settlement and payroll processing systems are not fully predictable, but they are not zero.
And here's the international dimension that makes this genuinely catastrophic rather than merely disruptive. Global trade, the movement of physical goods across borders, relies on payment systems for letters of credit, trade finance instruments, and supplier payment networks. A multi-day disruption of the dominant global payment infrastructure would begin disrupting international supply chains almost immediately. The ships don't stop, the planes don't stop, but the payment confirmation systems that clear cargo, release goods from customs, and settle trade finance instruments go dark. And the practical effect is that goods stop moving normally within days. Let me walk you through the historical cases that are most instructive for understanding what a Visa and Mastercard disruption actually looks like, because we do not have to speculate entirely. We have real examples to learn from. The most directly relevant is the 2012 failure of Visa Europe's payment processing system in the United Kingdom. For approximately 10 hours, Visa card transactions failed across the UK. Tens of millions of consumers could not make purchases. Retailers lost significant revenue. The economic impact of a 10-hour outage for a single country was estimated in the hundreds of millions of pounds, and the UK in 2012 had a significantly higher proportion of cash users than the UK or the US does in 2026. The cashless adoption that has happened in the intervening years means that the same 10-hour outage today would have a substantially more severe impact. In 2019, Visa experienced a major processing outage in Europe that lasted several hours, again affecting millions of transactions across multiple countries. In the same year, Mastercard experienced separate system issues that disrupted processing in the United States. These were relatively contained events, but they were events, and they happened to a system that is supposed to operate at 5 nines availability, meaning 99.999% uptime. Even fractional deviations from that standard have measurable economic consequences. The most extreme historical parallel, not for payment networks specifically, but for the economic consequences of suddenly losing access to previously reliable financial infrastructure, comes from natural disasters. When Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico in 2017, the island's banking and payment infrastructure was effectively destroyed for weeks. Puerto Rico reverted to a cash economy overnight, except that ATMs had no power and bank branches were closed. The economic disruption was severe, prolonged, and deeply personal for millions of residents who could not access their own money, could not pay bills, and could not conduct normal economic activity. And then there's the Russia example from 2022, which I want to return to because it is the most directly relevant and the most instructive for understanding both the mechanisms and the consequences of a deliberate payment network suspension. When Visa and Mastercard suspended operations in Russia in March 2022, it was not total chaos because Russia had spent years building an alternative. The Mir card network, which Russia developed specifically because of concerns about its Visa and Mastercard dependency, handled domestic transactions. But for international payments, Russian tourists abroad, Russian businesses importing goods, Russian citizens trying to pay for international services, the disruption was complete and immediate. The lesson Russia learned was to build alternatives before you need them. Most countries did not take that lesson seriously enough. Now here's the 2026 context that makes this more urgent than any of these historical examples. We are in a period of deliberate financial system fragmentation. China has built its own cross-border payment alternative, the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, or CIPS, specifically designed to facilitate international transactions in yuan without relying on Western payment infrastructure. The digital yuan, the 𝐒𝐶NY, is being deployed internationally through Project mBridge and similar initiatives as an explicit alternative to dollar-denominated payment systems. 30-plus nations are in various stages of developing central bank digital currencies. The geopolitical motivation for all of this development is explicitly the lesson of Russia in 2022: reduce dependence on systems that the United States can weaponize. This means that in 2026, the global financial architecture is fracturing into competing payment system camps, and in that environment, Visa and Mastercard, American companies, face both the risk of cyber attack from adversaries and the risk of being used as geopolitical weapons in ways that trigger retaliatory responses. The weaponization risk is not just in one direction. Alright, here's what you actually do, and I want to be clear that some of what I am going to say sounds almost old-fashioned in 2026, but the whole point of preparation is that it sounds unnecessary until the moment it becomes essential. Standard disclaimer first: nothing here is personalized financial or legal advice. Your specific situation requires qualified professionals. What I am giving you is a practical resilience framework based on how financially sophisticated people think about payment system risk. The first thing you need to do is maintain a meaningful physical cash reserve. I know, everyone has heard this and almost nobody does it, but the data is stark. The average American carries under $20 in cash in 2026. That is not a buffer, that is nothing. For a payment system disruption that lasts even 24 to 48 hours, you need enough cash to buy groceries, buy fuel, and handle immediate essential expenses without access to card payments. That means having at minimum $500 to $1,000 in cash at home in accessible small denominations as a permanent household reserve. Not $500 in your bank account, $500 in physical cash in a secure location in your home. This is not about being a prepper. This is about having the same financial resilience that every household had in 1995 without even thinking about it. Second, maintain accounts at multiple financial institutions and ensure you have access to multiple payment networks. This means having at least one Visa card and one Mastercard, preferably issued by different banks. It means having an American Express card if possible, since Amex operates its own closed-loop network that is separate from the Visa and Mastercard infrastructure. It means having a debit card linked to an account that can draw cash from ATMs, and it means knowing your PIN numbers, not just using tap to pay, because in a disruption scenario, chip and PIN transactions may process through different pathways than contactless payments. Third, for small business owners and freelancers watching this, the cash flow vulnerability in a payment disruption is existential in a way it is not for salaried employees. Your payment processing should not rely on a single processor or a single network. If you currently process payments only through a single Square or Stripe account, both of which route through Visa and Mastercard, you are fully exposed to a network disruption. Consider maintaining the ability to accept cash, to accept bank transfers directly, and potentially to accept payment through PayPal
PayPal or other alternative networks that have some independent processing capability. Having even one additional payment pathway that does not run through the card networks is meaningful resilience.
Fourth, from an investment perspective, understand the strategic position of Visa and Mastercard themselves. These are two of the most profitable companies in the world. Visa's net income margin consistently runs above 50%. Mastercard's is similar. They have extraordinary pricing power, extraordinary network effects, and no meaningful competitive threat to their core business in the near term. The risks I have described today, cyber attack, geopolitical disruption, are real, but they are more likely to create temporary operational disruptions than to permanently impair the business franchise of these companies. If anything, a major disruption that highlights the systemic importance of payment network resilience would likely accelerate regulatory pressure for increased investment in redundancy, which these companies would fund and profit from. For long-term investors, Visa and Mastercard remain among the highest quality businesses in the world, but understanding their geopolitical exposure is part of a complete thesis. Fifth, pay attention to the alternative payment system landscape as an investment theme. The fragmentation of the global payment system, driven by geopolitical de-dollarization, CBDC development, and the explicit effort by multiple nations to reduce Visa and Mastercard dependency, is creating investment opportunities in the infrastructure that supports alternative payment systems. Financial technology companies building cross-border payment infrastructure, companies involved in CBDC technology development, firms providing payment resilience solutions, these are emerging investment themes that are directly connected to the geopolitical dynamics we have been discussing. Sixth, understand your digital wallet exposure. Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, these are all convenient front ends that sit on top of the Visa and Mastercard networks. They are not independent payment systems. If the underlying card network fails, the digital wallet fails with it. Do not confuse the convenience of digital payments with redundancy. They are the same single point of failure wearing different clothing. Let me give you the biggest picture view of where the global payment system is heading, because understanding the direction of travel is as important as understanding the current risk. The global payment system is fragmenting. This is not a prediction. It is an observable, documented, and accelerating trend. The combination of the Russia 2022 sanctions, China's deliberate development of yuan-based payment infrastructure, the proliferation of central bank digital currencies, and the explicit policy goal of multiple nations to reduce dollar and dollar network dependency, all of these forces are pushing toward a world where Visa and Mastercard's near monopoly on global payment infrastructure is challenged in ways it has never been challenged before. The irony is that this fragmentation, which is partly a response to Visa and Mastercard being used as geopolitical tools, simultaneously reduces and increases the risk for American consumers and investors. It reduces the risk in the sense that a more fragmented payment system may be more resilient to any single point of failure. It increases the risk in the sense that American companies competing in a world of fragmented payment standards and geopolitical payment rivalries face a more complex operating environment. For the average American consumer and investor, the practical implication of this trend is straightforward. The payment infrastructure you depend on is becoming a geopolitical battleground. That does not mean it's going to fail tomorrow. It means that maintaining personal financial resilience, cash reserves, payment diversification, multiple banking relationships, is more important in 2026 than it was in 2016. The infrastructure is more politically loaded, more contested, and more deliberately targeted than it has ever been. And here's the final thought I want to leave you with on this. Every major financial system vulnerability that has ever materialized, the 2008 credit crisis, the 2020 liquidity panic, the SVB collapse in 2023, was a scenario that seemed extremely unlikely until the moment it was not. The concentration of global payment infrastructure in two American private companies operating in a world of accelerating geopolitical conflict with sophisticated nation-state cyber adversaries actively probing financial system vulnerabilities is exactly the kind of structural risk that seems fine right up until it's not. The people who prepared were the ones who did not predict the exact event. They were the ones who understood the structural vulnerability and took modest, inexpensive steps to be less dependent on the single point of failure. Here's what I want you to walk away with.
Visa and Mastercard process the vast majority of the world's non-cash transactions. They are two private American companies sitting at the center of a system that 8 billion people depend on for basic economic participation. In 2026, that system faces cyber threats from the most sophisticated adversaries in history, geopolitical weaponization pressures from an increasingly fractured world order, and the deliberate effort of multiple major nations to build alternatives that reduce American payment network dominance. A disruption, partial or full, temporary or sustained, would cascade through every corner of daily economic life within hours. The response is not to panic. It is to be the person who has $500 in cash at home, who has cards on 2 different networks from 2 different banks, who knows their PIN, and who has thought about what they would actually do if their card was declined for 24 hours. That's cheap insurance, and cheap insurance against a catastrophic scenario is always worth having. Drop a comment below. Do you currently carry cash? And have you ever thought about what you would do if your card stopped working for 48 hours? I genuinely want to know how prepared people feel about this. I read every comment. If this video revealed a risk you had not thought about, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this reach more people who need to think through their payment system resilience. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the macro and systemic risks that most financial media does not cover until they're already happening. Turn on notifications. Share this with one person in your life who went completely cashless and has never considered what happens if the system goes down. Coming up very soon, we are going deep on the geopolitical battle for the global payment system, China's digital yuan, the BRICS payment alternatives, and what de-dollarization of the payment system means for American economic power and your investments. That one connects everything we've talked about today to the biggest financial story of the decade. I'll see you there.
Subscribe to Investify. More financial videos, real insights, zero fluff. Let's build wealth together.